Taking full responsibility is the moment life begins to shift, because responsibility returns power back to you. As long as blame exists, progress stays locked. When you blame circumstances, people, or timing, you silently admit that your future is controlled by forces outside you. Responsibility is not about shame or regret. It is about clarity. It is the clear understanding that your choices, reactions, and tolerances have shaped where you are. Once you accept that truth, you are no longer a victim of conditions. You become the author of outcomes, capable of rewriting patterns through deliberate decisions and conscious behavior. Most people misunderstand responsibility and confuse it with self-criticism, but responsibility is actually self-respect. It is the refusal to lie to yourself about what you allowed, avoided, or postponed. Growth accelerates when excuses disappear because excuses delay action. When you say, I chose this, even if unknowingly, you unlock the ability to choose differently next time. Responsibility creates emotional maturity and mental strength. It stops you from waiting to be rescued and starts training you to respond instead of react. The moment you stop pointing outward, your attention turns inward, where real transformation begins. Excuses feel comforting because they protect the ego, but they quietly poison progress. Every excuse is a story designed to make an action feel reasonable. Responsibility, on the other hand, demands courage because it removes the safety net of justification. When you own your results, you stop arguing with reality and start working with it. Life rewards people who respond to truth, not those who hide from it. Responsibility sharpens awareness, and awareness reveals patterns. Patterns, once unseen, become obvious, and what becomes obvious becomes changeable. This shift alone can compress years of growth into months. Responsibility also reshapes identity. When you stop seeing yourself as someone things happen to, you start seeing yourself as someone who makes things happen. Your standards rise naturally. You no longer tolerate habits, environments, and relationships that contradict the future you desire. Responsibility upgrades how you speak, how you plan, and how you show up. You become intentional with time because wasted time now feels expensive. You become selective with energy because distractions are recognized as choices. This internal shift quietly transforms daily behavior long before visible results appear. Taking ownership forces honesty, and honesty is uncomfortable before it is empowering. It exposes gaps between intention and execution, between dreams and discipline. Many avoid responsibility because it removes the ability to pretend, but pretending delays growth. Responsibility brings alignment between who you say you want to become and what you actually do. Alignment creates momentum. Momentum builds confidence. Confidence strengthens action. Each layer compounds, and it all starts with the willingness to say, I am responsible for my life. Even when the truth feels heavy, responsibility also improves decision-making because it sharpens cause and effect. When you know your actions create outcomes, you think differently before acting. Impulsive choices decrease. Long-term thinking increases. You begin asking better questions about consequences and direction. Responsibility trains the mind to consider future impact instead of immediate comfort. It builds discipline without force, because discipline becomes logical, not emotional. You stop negotiating with yourself and start committing. Over time, this creates consistency, and consistency produces results that motivation alone can never sustain. When responsibility becomes a lifestyle, resilience strengthens. Challenges no longer feel personal attacks, but feedback systems. Instead of asking why something happened, you ask what it is teaching. This mindset transforms setbacks into strategy. You waste less time complaining and more time adjusting. Responsibility does not make life easier, but it makes you stronger. Strength attracts opportunity because capable people are trusted with more. Responsibility turns pressure into preparation and difficulty into development, shaping character quietly through repetition and reflection. Ownership ultimately changes how you measure success. Success stops being external validation and becomes internal alignment. You evaluate days by effort, integrity, and growth rather than applause. Responsibility removes the need for permission and replaces it with self-leadership. You stop waiting for clarity and start creating it through action. Every small decision becomes meaningful because it is owned. Life becomes less about chance and more about choice. Less about reaction and more about direction. Less about hope and more about deliberate movement forward. What you allow into your mind quietly becomes the framework for how you see the world. Every thought you entertain shapes perception, and perception drives behavior. If your mind is constantly exposed to fear, doubt, negativity, and limitation, your actions will reflect caution and hesitation. Your mind does not filter truth from noise on its own, simply as well as repetition. Whatever you hear most often begins to sound normal. Over time, this mental diet forms beliefs, and beliefs influence choices. Improving your life requires intentional control over what influences your thinking daily, consistently, and without compromise. Many people underestimate the power of repeated exposure. A single negative thought may seem harmless, but repeated negative messages become internal instructions. Music, conversations, social media, news, and casual talk all compete for space in your mind. If you do not choose deliberately, your environment will choose for you. The mind is always learning, even when you are not aware of it. What feels like entertainment slowly becomes education. Guarding your mind is not about isolation. It is about discernment, knowing what deserves access and what quietly steals focus and confidence. Your thoughts shape your emotional state long before circumstances change. Two people can experience the same situation and respond completely differently because their thinking patterns differ. When your mind is trained on growth, possibility, and truth, pressure produces creativity. When your mind is trained on fear and limitation, pressure reproduces paralysis. Mental discipline determines emotional stability. The quality of your inner dialogue determines how long setbacks last and how quickly you recover. By upgrading your thinking, you upgrade your emotional responses without changing external conditions. Most limitations are first formed mentally before they ever appear physically. People often say they lack opportunity, but what they really lack is belief. Belief is built through consistent exposure to ideas that stretch thinking. When your mind expands, options multiply. You start noticing possibilities that were invisible before. The brain searches for evidence to confirm what it already believes. If you believe growth is possible, your mind looks for paths forward. If you believe limitation is permanent, your mind looks for reasons to stop. Mental input also influences identity. Over time, you begin to think the way you listen. If you constantly hear messages that reinforce scarcity, weakness, or fear, your self-image slowly shrinks. When you hear messages that reinforce responsibility, growth, and value, your identity expands. Identity determines behavior more than motivation ever will. People act in alignment with who they believe they are. Changing your input changes your identity. And changing identity changes behavior naturally, without force or struggle. Guarding your mind requires replacing harmful input with intentional learning. Silence alone is not enough. The mind fills gaps automatically. You must feed it truth, wisdom, and constructive ideas. Reading, listening, and reflecting are not passive acts. They are strategic investments. Every strong decision is preceded by strong thinking. Strong thinking is built through consistent exposure to higher level ideas. This is why growth-focused people schedule learning intentionally, not casually, treating it as essential, not optional. Your thoughts also influence how you interpret feedback. With a healthy mental framework, correction becomes instruction, not insult. Criticism becomes information, not identity. When the mind is guarded, emotions are regulated more effectively. You respond instead of react. You pause instead of panic. Mental clarity creates emotional space, and emotional space improves judgment. Over time, this leads to better decisions under pressure and steadier progress during uncertainty. When you control your mental environment, you stop being mentally reactive and start becoming mentally proactive. You choose what deserves attention and what does not. You no longer allow random opinions to shape your direction. Focus strengthens because distractions lose power. Confidence grows because thoughts align with purpose. Your mind becomes a tool instead of a battlefield. Every improvement in life begins with improved thinking because thinking is the root system from which all visible results grow. Simplicity is the hidden accelerator of progress because clarity removes friction. Most people feel stuck not because they lack ability, but because their attention is scattered across too many priorities. When everything feels important, nothing receives full focus. Simplifying your life means identifying what truly matters and eliminating what does not contribute to your growth. Clarity sharpens decision-making and reduces mental fatigue. When the mind is not overwhelmed, energy is redirected toward execution. Simplicity is not about doing less out of laziness. It is about doing less so that what remains can be done with excellence and consistency. Complexity often feels productive because it creates the illusion of busyness. Many confuse motion with progress and activity with achievement. Simplification exposes this illusion by forcing honest evaluation. When you remove unnecessary commitments, distractions, and obligations, you confront what truly drives results. This confrontation can feel uncomfortable because it removes excuses. Simplicity demands courage because it requires saying no more often than yes. However, every no protects a future yes. Reducing clutter in your schedule creates space for intentional action and measurable improvement. Mental clutter is just as damaging as physical clutter. Too many ideas, unfinished tasks, and open loops create constant background stress. This stress drains focus and weakens follow through. Simplifying your thinking involves prioritizing a small number of clear goals and committing to them fully. When your mind knows exactly what it is working toward, resistance decreases. Focus increases naturally. The brain performs best when direction is clear. Simplicity transforms confusion into alignment, making effort feel lighter even when the work remains challenging. Simplicity also strengthens discipline because it reduces decision fatigue. Every unnecessary choice consumes mental energy. When routines are simplified, discipline becomes easier to maintain. You no longer negotiate with yourself repeatedly because the path is already defined. Clear systems replace emotional decision-making. This consistency compounds over time, reducing results that appear effortless from the outside. Simplicity removes friction between intention and action, allowing momentum to build steadily through repetition rather than bursts of motivation. When life is simplified, priorities become visible. You begin to see which activities produce growth and which merely consume time. This awareness leads to better time management without rigid control. Time is no longer filled, it is invested. Simplification encourages intentional scheduling, where high-impact tasks receive the best energy. Low-value tasks are minimized or removed. As a result, progress accelerates even though fewer things are being done. This is the power of focus applied with discipline. Simplicity also improves emotional clarity. When commitments are aligned with values, stress decreases. Much anxiety comes from living out of alignment, saying yes to things that conflict with purpose. Simplifying restores integrity between intention and behavior. Emotional stability increases because internal conflict decreases. You feel lighter, not because life is easier, but because it is clearer. Clear direction reduces regret and hesitation, allowing you to move forward with confidence and resolve. Simplification enhances learning and growth by reducing noise. When fewer goals compete for attention, learning becomes deeper and more effective. You can apply what you learn immediately rather than collecting information without execution. Growth accelerates because feedback becomes clearer. You know what is working and what is not. Adjustments are easier to make because variables are limited. This focused approach transforms learning into progress instead of accumulation. Living simply does not limit potential, it unlocks it. By removing distractions, you create space for mastery. Mastery requires sustained attention over time, which complexity disrupts. Simplification aligns effort with purpose and action with direction. When focus is protected, progress becomes inevitable. Life begins to move faster, not because you rush, but because nothing is in the way, and every step forward is intentional, deliberate, and aligned. Your environment is constantly shaping you, whether you are aware of it or not. The people you listen to, the places you spend time, and the conversations you entertain quietly influence your beliefs and behavior. You absorb attitudes before you adopt actions. When surrounded by negativity, doubt becomes normal. When surrounded by growth, improvement feels expected. Environment works silently but powerfully. It reinforces patterns through repetition. This is why personal change often fails without environmental change. If the surroundings remain the same, old habits feel comfortable and new habits feel foreign, making progress harder than it needs to be. People influence you more through their standards than their words. You unconsciously rise or fall to the expectations of those closest to you. When the people around you tolerate mediocrity, effort feels optional. When they value discipline, consistency becomes normal. This is not about copying others. It is about alignment. Humans adapt to the culture they live in. If you want to elevate your results, you must elevate the standards of the environments you allow access to you. Growth thrives where high expectations are normalized. Conversations are a powerful part of environment. What you repeatedly talk about becomes what you repeatedly think about. Complaints train the mind to focus on problems, while constructive conversations train the mind to search for solutions. If every discussion revolves around fear, blame, or limitation, your thinking will follow the same pattern. Shifting conversations shifts mental focus. Being intentional about dialogue is not arrogance, it is awareness. Your future is too valuable to be shaped by careless talk or unexamined opinions. Physical spaces also influence performance. Cluttered environments create mental noise, while organized spaces promote clarity and focus. Where you work, rest, and think affects how you feel and act. Simple changes in space can produce immediate changes in behavior. Clean environments encourage discipline. Purposeful spaces encourage productivity. This is why intentional people design their environments instead of tolerating them. The space around you either supports your goals or silently resists them. Your digital environment matters just as much as your physical one. What you scroll through daily programs your thinking subtly but consistently. Constant exposure to comparison, negativity, or distraction weakens focus and self-belief. Curating digital input is an act of self-leadership. Choosing what you consume online determines what occupies your thoughts offline. Attention is limited, and where attention goes, energy follows. Protecting attention is essential for sustained growth and clarity. Environment also influences emotional regulation. Supportive environments reduce stress and increase resilience. Toxic environments increase emotional fatigue and drain motivation on. When you remain in spaces that constantly pull you down, progress feels exhausting. Growth environments provide encouragement, accountability, and perspective. They remind you of who you are becoming, not just where you have been. Emotional strength is easier to build when surrounded by stability and positive reinforcement. Changing environment does not always mean abandoning people. Sometimes it means adjusting proximity and influence. You can love people without allowing them to shape your future. Boundaries protect growth. Intentional distance creates space for development. As your environment improves, your standards rise naturally. You begin to expect more from yourself and others. This shift feels uncomfortable at first, but discomfort is often the doorway to expansion. When you intentionally choose environments that support growth, progress accelerates without constant effort. Discipline becomes easier because the surroundings reinforce the right behaviors. Motivation becomes less necessary because consistency is built into daily life. Your environment becomes a silent partner in success, shaping habits, reinforcing beliefs, and supporting long-term direction through constant, subtle influence. Discipline is the quiet force that shapes outcomes long before results appear. It is not driven by emotion or excitement, but by commitment to a standard. Daily habits determine direction because they compound whether you notice them or not. What you repeat becomes what you become. Discipline is choosing what matters most over what feels best in the moment. It removes dependence on mood and replaces it with structure. When discipline is present, progress continues even over any difficult days. This consistency builds trust in yourself, and self-trust strengthens confidence through repeated qualities. Many people wait to feel motivated before acting, but motivation is unreliable and inconsistent. Discipline fills the gap when motivation disappears. Habits formed through discipline require less energy over time, because they become automatic. The brain conserves effort by turning repeated actions into routines. This is why disciplined people appear calm under pressure. They are not deciding what to do every day, they already decided once. Discipline reduces internal negotiation and frees mental energy for execution. Daily habits shape identity silently. When you act consistently, your self-image adjusts to match your behavior. You stop trying to convince yourself that you are capable of actions prove it. Discipline builds evidence, and evidence builds belief. This is more powerful than positive thinking alone. When habits align with values, integrity grows. Integrity strengthens character. Character supports resilience. Each small disciplined action reinforces the belief that you can be trusted with greater responsibility and opportunity. Discipline also creates momentum. Small actions repeated daily produce visible progress over time. Momentum reduces resistance because progress becomes addictive. When you see movement, you want more of it. Discipline turns that into rhythm. Rhythm turns burden into This cycle allows discipline to accomplish more without being overwhelmed. They're not which produces extraordinary output. Without discipline, even the best intentions fade. Intentions without structure rely on willpower, and willpower is limited. Discipline creates systems that operate regardless of emotion. Systems outperform goals because systems guide behavior daily. A disciplined system ensures progress even when focus is low. This reliability compounds into long-term success. Discipline transforms goals from wishes into processes, making achievement predictable instead of accidental. Discipline sharpens decision-making. When standards are clear, choices become easier. You do not debate whether to act, you simply act according to principle. This clarity reduces stress because uncertainty disappears. Discipline creates alignment between intention and action. Alignment produces peace of mind. When actions match values, inner conflict decreases. Life feels simpler, not because it is easier, but because direction is clear and behavior is consistent. Over time, discipline creates freedom. This seems contradictory, but structure creates space. When habits are disciplined, time is managed intentionally. Productivity increases, leaving room for rest and creativity. Discipline protects energy by preventing waste. It eliminates chaos by replacing it with order. This order supports growth without burnout. Disciplined living reduces regret because actions are chosen, not impulsive. When discipline becomes part of identity, progress no longer feels forced. Habits operate quietly in the background, guiding behavior automatically. Growth becomes a natural outcome rather than a struggle. Daily discipline transforms potential into reality through repetition, patience, and consistency, shaping results steadily and relentlessly. Through intentional habits practiced every single day. Confidence is often misunderstood as something you must feel before you act, but in reality, it is something you earn after you move. Waiting for confidence keeps people stuck because feelings rarely arrive on schedule. Action creates clarity, not the other way around. When you move despite uncertainty, you gather evidence. Evidence reshapes belief. Belief strengthens confidence. This sequence never starts with emotion, it starts with motion. Fear loses power when confronted directly. Each small step forward proves that discomfort is survivable and progress is possible, reshaping how you see yourself through lived experience. Most people overestimate the danger of action and underestimate the cost of hesitation. Hesitation reinforces doubt because the mind fills silence with fear. Action interrupts this cycle. Even imperfect movement creates momentum. Momentum quiets fear because the mind shifts from imagining outcomes to managing reality. Confidence grows when you see yourself handling situations you once avoided. You realize you are more capable than you thought. This realization does not come from thinking, it comes from doing. Action teaches lessons no amount of preparation can provide. Confidence is built through repetition, not intensity. One bold move may feel powerful, but consistent action builds lasting safety. Each time you act despite discomfort, your nervous system what once felt threatening becomes familiar. Familiarity reduces fear. less authority it has over you. Action trains courage quietly through exposure and experience. Waiting for readiness is a subtle form of avoidance. Readiness is not a state you arrive at, it is a decision you make. You become ready by starting. Action reveals gaps in skill and knowledge, which then guides improvement. Without action, growth remains theoretical. Confidence grows when learning is applied in real conditions. Mistakes become feedback instead of failure. Each correction strengthens competence, and competence reinforces confidence through tangible progress. Action also shifts identity. When you repeatedly act, you begin to see yourself as someone who takes initiative. Identity changes behavior automatically. You stop asking if you can and start asking how. This shift transforms effort from forced to natural. Confidence rooted in identity is stable because it is based on who you believe you are, not how you feel in a moment. Identity level confidence endures pressure and adapts to challenge. Fear does not disappear before action, it fades during action. Movement redirects focus from internal doubt to external execution. When attention shifts to the task, fear loses center stage. You become present instead of anxious. Presence improves performance. Performance reinforces belief. This loop strengthens confidence organically. The body learns that action is safe and the mind follows. Over time, fear becomes a signal to move rather than a reason to stop. Action builds trust with yourself. Each time you follow through, you reinforce the belief that you are reliable. Self-trust is the foundation of confidence. When you trust yourself to act even when uncomfortable, doubt weakens. Confidence is not arrogance, it is assurance built on proof. Proof comes from experience. Experience comes from action. This is why confident people move quickly. They trust themselves to adapt. When action becomes habitual, confidence stops being a goal and becomes a byproduct. You no longer wait for permission, certainty, or perfect conditions. You move, adjust, and improve continuously. Growth accelerates because fear no longer controls decisions. Action becomes the default response to uncertainty, and confidence grows naturally through consistent movement forward into challenges that once felt impossible.